Christ in downtown Portland, Oregon, offering Zoom worship at 10:30 a.m. on Sundays, and also streaming out on Facebook Live and YouTube Live now. Glad you could be with us today for our podcast, and we are joined by a very special guest who's known to many in Portland and also to me well before ever coming to Portland. This is Cecil Prescott. He is the Associate Minister of Faith Development at Ainsworth United Church of Christ here in Portland, and he is also a former guest on Darkwood Brew, the internet television program I hosted a number of years ago, and I just happened to be coming through Portland and joined him. This is a photograph of him when he was a guest, and I was coming through Portland, and so we got on together as host and guest of that program. And Cecil, it's great to see you. Oh, I'm gonna unmute. I'm gonna unmute you. There we go. Great to have you on with us today.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's a delight to be here with all these great people.
Yeah. So we're going to start out, though, with just a little bit of a warm-up up here. This is a video that was created by Brandon Sloan, I think, that fits our theme. We're looking at love overcoming evil, which sounds like something you just kind of think, well, of course. I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to say? Love overcomes evil. But when push comes to shove, oftentimes we meet force with force. So this won't be necessarily the easiest episode because we're gonna, really gonna, dig into that concept. But let's let Brandon Sloan begin helping us out here.
The world is coming to an end. The air is polluted, the ocean's contaminated. The animals are going extinct, the economy's collapsed. Education is shot, police are corrupt. Intelligence is shunned and ignorance rewarded. The people are depressed and angry, we can't live with each other and we can't live with ourselves, so everyone's medicated. We pass each other on the streets, and if we do speak, it's meaningless robotic communication. More people want 15 seconds of fame than a lifetime of meaning and purpose, because what's popular is more important than what's right. Ratings are more important than the truth. Our government builds twice as many prisons than schools. It's easier to find a Big Mac than an apple. And when you find the apple, it's been genetically processed and modified. Presidents lie, politicians trick us. Race is still an issue, and so is religion. Your God doesn't exist, my God does, and He is all-loving. If you disagree with me, I'll kill you, or even worse, argue you to death. 92% of songs on the radio are about sex. Kids don't play tag, they play twerk videos. The average person watches 5 hours of television a day, and it's more violence on the screen than ever before. Technology has given us everything we could ever want, and at the same time stolen everything we really need. Pride is at an all-time high, humility an all-time low. Everybody knows everything, everybody's going somewhere, ignoring someone, blaming somebody. Not many human beings left anymore. A lot of human doings, plenty of human lingerings in the past. Not many human beings. Money is still the root of all evil, yet we tell our kids, don't get that degree, the jobs don't pay enough. Good deeds are only done when there's a profit margin. Videos of the misfortunes of others go viral. We laugh and share them with our friends to laugh with us. Our role models today, 60 years ago, would have been examples of what not to be. There are states where people can legally be discriminated against because they were born a certain way. Companies invest millions of dollars hiring specialists to make little girls feel like they need makeup to be beautiful, permanently lowering their self-esteem because they will never be pretty enough to meet those impossible standards. Corporations tell us, buy, get this, get that. You must keep up, you must fit in. This will make you happy, but it never does for long. So what can we do in the face of all this madness and chaos? What is the solution? We can love. Not the love you hear in your favorite song on the radio. I mean real love, true love, boundless love. You can love each other from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. Perform an act of kindness because that is contagious. We can be mindful during every interaction, planting seeds of goodness, showing a little more compassion than usual. We can forgive because 300 years from now, will that grudge you hold against your friend, your mother, your father have been worth it? Instead of trying to change others, we can change ourselves. We can change our hearts. We've been sold lies, brainwashed by our leaders and those we trust, and not recognize our brothers and sisters, and to exhibit anger, hatred, and cruelty. But once we truly love, we will meet anger with sympathy, hatred with compassion, cruelty with kindness. Love is the most powerful weapon on the face of the earth. Robert Kennedy once said that few will have the greatness to be in history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of a generation. So yes, the world is coming to an end, and the path towards a new beginning starts within you.
Brandon Sloan, not bad. Now, Cecil, as I mentioned up front, you are the Associate Minister of Faith Formation at Ainsworth United Church of Christ here in Portland. What does a Minister of Faith Formation do?
Great question, because I'm trying to discover it every day. I think part of it is accompanying people as they uncover and speak about who they are and how they relate to the world and to God as they encounter God. So I consider myself as someone who accompanied people on their journeys, and my roles include traditional things such as organizing Sunday school and events for adult education, as well as youth and children. But as I said, the important part, I think, is accompanying and guiding people as they uncover their journey and their experience with God.
Great. So this last year in Portland, of course, I wasn't here for most of the year. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, but obviously there was a lot of heat and light, both going on in Portland. I imagine in your role as a faith formation person, coming alongside people, you saw a lot of struggle.
Indeed, it was and is a time of people wrestling and discovering and uncovering. For me, it seemed biblical almost, in the way in which it seems as if things were unfolding in ways that people had not experienced beforehand, and not only in the church, but as we witnessed in the community and in the streets of our cities, and indeed cities around the world. People were coming to a new understanding of who they were and how to form a type of community, how to confront something which became so terrible and terrifying to them, and help to create a different vision, a different way of being. And for many of us, it was a way in which we participated with one another in creating a new community, a community that continues to unfold, and as we continue to walk into it.
So you mentioned the new community that you see forming. What are some of the characteristics of that community that's forming that had not been present before?
Well, I'm not sure whether these things had not been present. What had not been present, people awareness. So, for example, many people in the religious or faith community were not connected with many of the people who were not a part of traditional faith communities. And what we discovered were that people were forming communities of support. And what we witnessed on the streets a lot were people coming together supporting one another, um, creating ways in which they could feed one another and guide one another, mutual aid societies building up, and opportunities for churches such as your church, First Congregational in Portland, being sort of like a way station, a place where people in the middle of all that, what appear to be chaos, could be a place of refuge, of rest. And so we were discovering ways in which the community was being developed and formed in new and different ways.
Hmm. Great. So, were there any instances that you can think of, especially from this last kind of summer and fall, where like in national reporting, of course, where I was trying to follow this, but from a distance, and of course the national reporting, all you ever saw was rioting and blah blah blah. But I know that from talking to people on the ground, there are a lot of points of light and great real stories of courage and bravery and also that kind of love overcoming evil. Are there any particular incidents that stick out to you from a person on the ground here that gave you some hope and inspiration?
A couple, and it's amazing. And one was how I saw young people organizing and finding ways to support one another, people who had not experienced. And these were people, I'm thinking, as young as middle school and even younger, not only coming into the streets, but supporting one another and learning about movements in the past and how they are a part of that stream of, of love and righteousness that continues today. And at the other extreme, not extreme, but in terms of age, is something that continues to happen today, is that I noticed that there a community in Portland, in Northeast Portland, where I know at least weekly and maybe every day, people from a retirement community gather on the streets, even today, months after, the reporters have left and things supposedly have calmed down. And people from this retirement community stand up on the corners of the streets with signs saying that Black Lives Matters. And they are just showing their continued support of a new world that we are creating together. So young people and older people and everyone else in the midst are doing great and marvelous things in often untold ways that is, I think, a signs of the wonders of the community we hope for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that when we talk about love overcoming evil or the darker the kind of that more negative side, love has such a we tend to think warm, fuzzy, makes us feel good, but can love also result in protest?
Love is certainly can result and can be shown in by protest. Martin King said that love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. So love has to confront the enemy of that which is evil and that which dehumanizes and destroys our community and our world. And love is a force that is willing to stand up and to bear witness to another way of being.
Mm.
Uh, and as we are reminded, Julian of Norwich, she has that famous saying that, all shall be well and all shall be well and all manners of things shall be exceedingly well. Well, that isn't from a sense of unconnectedness with reality, but it's from a very real connectedness with the way the world is and imagining and visioning the way in which love is able to transform that which is evil. Evil will not be triumphant, and as people such as King and those this March is the anniversary of that famous Selma March. And people such as John Lewis and young people and older people, when the police came and knocked them down literally, the amazing thing was that 2 weeks later, the people from all over the nation came together in Selma and marched to the state capitol. It was a symbol almost of how love, knocked down temporarily, was able to rise up and continue the procession for a new way and a new world.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. We were actually talking about the Selma bridge crossing this morning, and Philip Yancey, a popular Christian writer, who actually there's an excerpt from his book, The Jesus I Never Knew, that where he talks about his own experiences being kind of more on the wrong side of history on this until he saw what was going on, the dogs unleashed on innocent people and so forth, and how the nation really led the response from all kinds of, in his own words, white racists like me, the transformational quality. It led so directly to a lot of good civil rights legislation, and how that actually transformed people when they saw, they kind of looked at the police with their German shepherds sicking them on innocent people, and then they looked at the protesters and they said, well, which one do I feel more affinity with? And they're like, I feel more affinity with the protesters. And were there instances like that in Portland, or have there been, where you see actual transformation taking place from people who have been on the, what we would view as the wrong side of history on this?
Right. I think there are, one thing that is maybe disappointing or just maybe a sign of the times is that we seem to be so separated in our own camps. And the fact that, the thing about what happened in Selma was, in those days, there were maybe 3 broadcast company. Everyone saw the same film and the same news reports. What happens today is that all of us are in our own separate cocoons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of the challenge is, how do we break out of our cocoons and engage with one another? And I think it takes place, quite frankly, on a very small, intimate level.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it happens for all of us in our families, in our small circles. That's the beginning of breaking down and having those meaningful conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, we can seek out to change the whole world, but we're going to be disappointed every time. It seems like there's been injustice and all kinds of oppression from the beginning of before recorded history, and there probably will be afterwards. But it seems like it is on when you dial down to that individual level where the real action takes place.
Yeah, and it doesn't remain there on the individual level. It has a power to transform even the community and to spread out. Love has that amazing power to begin to operate in ways we could not hardly imagine. Hardly imagine the miracle of love.
Yeah, it's like once you experience love, you don't want to let go of that which causes you to feel those things. It's like that's the last thing you want to let go of. So it has a tendency to grow and build over time.
It does, and it builds and grows and transforms us. Not only the person that we thought was our enemy, but it transformed all of us. And that's what love is. It's not winning someone over to my side or I'm being converted to their side. It's the transformation into a new world that we all are invited to enter into.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Julian Norwich earlier, and of course she's been kind of in the background of things during this this series, and certainly in our church worship too. We've been looking at her, and because she wrote during a pandemic, a much harsher pandemic than ours, and it's amazing that she can come out and say, all will be well, all be well, all manner of things will be exceedingly well during what was a global pandemic that was far worse than this one. Has she had some influence on you?
She has. a long time ago, when I was in college, a group of us got together, and I'm not sure why, but somehow Julian of Norwich was someone picked up, Revelation of Divine Love, and we all began reading it together. And what I discovered, and when you're very young, you think you know everything, and I guess when you're very old, you think you know everything. But at that point in time, what I discovered was the fact that here she was, a woman um, in a society that not only refused to affirm women, but also, as you mentioned, in the middle of a pandemic, and she was able, out of that troubling, unimaginable situation, to have the eyes and the heart of understanding, to manage to see that even in the midst of disappointment, that it is possible that good and love and truth can rise up out of that. And so that was very encouraging, as I sat in my room, in college, and tried to finish my uh, paper, because it had to be done. So as I, burn the midnight oil and say, okay, it shall be well, Cecil, it shall be well.
Right.
All things shall be well. But, even in a larger sense, she had an influence or impact on me.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. That a lot of people will criticize, others who will kind of look to this future, goodness, like, as she, gives voice to, because they claim that leads to pacifism, or passivity rather, not pacifism, passivity. You're not going to stand up and work to change things if you think, well, it's all going to work out in the end anyway. But that was the exact opposite of the effect it had on Julian.
I think it is true that those who I honor and look up, when they have that sense of love, is something that empowers, that guides, that saying, that knowing that out of this situation we can imagine something even greater, and that this force um, allows and guides and prompts us to participate in this magnificent work. It doesn't lead to passivity, as the people we admire in the struggle for social justice throughout the world. It rather leads to action, with a passion, and a knowledge that all will be well, and that truth and love will triumph over evil and destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that the people who are motivated into the most bold action, either positive or negative, are people who are convinced they have nothing to lose. So if you have no hope and you have nothing to lose, so you might engage in very negative activity because you got nothing to lose. But it seems like it also works in the opposite direction. If you are convinced that all will work out, now or in eternity, it emboldens people to, in a sense, say, I have nothing to lose by acting boldly, here and courageously and standing up for something, rather than just kind of playing it meek and mild. And it's far from being the opiate of the masses. That a true hope founded in a realistic understanding of the triumph of love actually seems to motivate some of the greatest social activists that have ever lived.
Indeed, I was just reminded as you were speaking about how it motivates, and we may be familiar with that time for Martin Luther King, when he was in his kitchen, and after his home had been bombed, and he knelt down in prayer and desperation, overcome by God, is this right? Should I continue in this process? And what he experienced is something that many others have and will experience, being overwhelmed by a sense of love and strength. that God is with them, and that the power that's in them, that unconditional love, will prompt and continue to motivate and give us courage to end the struggle. So when we are overwhelmed and filled with that unconditional love, it empowers us and enlightens us to continue in the journey.
That's beautiful. You know, we only have a few minutes left. I got two more questions I want to ask you. I'll ask them both, and then you can kind of choose. Maybe the same answer applies to both. I don't know. But do you, as the minister of faith formation, then would you have any advice for those who might be watching this video cast and really, you know, feeling pretty discouraged about, you know, the state of the world and so forth? How do you advise them to put them in that place of greatest opportunity to experience something like a Martin Luther King experienced? And the second question I have is there maybe a personal experience you've had in your life that you think that comes to mind when it comes to this love triumphing over evil?
Mm. Wow, those are two difficult questions, and you know, I think it's possible for us to see how people overcome, and I think it's good to look at personal examples when we all feel defeated, because they give us example. I'll share just briefly. My maternal grandmother, she grew up in the segregated South, rural South. She left the South because of segregation, and she moved up to New York City. She became an activist and was so devoted to action and being a part of movement. When I was a small child, our family went to visit our relatives, my maternal relatives in the rural South. And this is just was the summer when a civil rights bill was passed, 1964. So my grandmother wanted to say, okay, let's see whether it really works or not. So we all piled into the car and went into town. And we stopped in front of I can imagine, must have been like a soda fountain, a Woolworth or a drugstore. And my grandmother got out of the car and said, we're going in there because it is now the law that they will serve us. And her sister-in-law, my Aunt Rebecca, who grew up in the rural South, was very much a child of the South and was a type of person who was formed by that experience of being fearful. And what I remember is my Aunt Rebecca almost frozen in the car, refusing to move. And at the same time, my grandmother, her sister-in-law, and saying, you know, this is now the law and we shall test it. And it was, for me as a young child, the contrast between these two people I love had felt deeply in my heart. And when I saw my grandmother getting out of the car and going into the restaurant, it sort of reminded me that although we may fear things, that it is possible if we really believe in love, that will triumph. So I remember my grandmother and believe that she had continued to influence me as an example of someone who believes in the power of unconditional love to transform us and indeed our societies.
Wow. How did that go for her when she went in?
Well, I'm sure she got served. And yeah, and knowing my grandmother, if she had not, she would have sat at that counter until she got served.
Yeah. And there, as much as we've been concentrating on, you know, kind of have the particular, in the individual, that is an example of how when we get involved collectively, love can change things collectively too. I reminded my friends who will say, well, I don't go to church because I don't believe in organized religion. And I always tell them, well, first of all, come to my church. We're disorganized religion. But I also think that, you know, love wants to be organized. Mm-hmm. Love wants to work for the greater good of the whole. And it sounds like, you know, I mean, there's an example of how love did that.
Yes, indeed. I agree. the forces of despair and evil and greed we are organized.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for those of us who want to see and feel the power of love, need to recognize that we need to be as organized as the forces we are opposing.
Yeah, good point. Evil certainly is organized, so as well get organized on as much as we can for ourselves too, and hopefully that our own inner evil is gets transformed in the process. Well, Cecil, it's been so good to see you again. I wish we could be seeing each other face to face. You know, that'll come shortly. I trust, and appreciate your coming on today.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for having this conversation. Blessings to you and to all those with you.
Thank you. Well, we have just one more episode in this particular series of Converging Paths. That'll be next week, which is actually Palm Sunday as well, but we will gather. We're going to take kind of a look at the whole series now. We've been through 8 weeks. We will have been through 8 weeks, and we're going to look at what particular insights have we learned during the pandemic, not just during the 8 weeks, but during the entire pandemic, that we might want to bring with us into a post-pandemic world for ourselves as individuals, but also through collectively as a faith community and as a society. So my guest next week is you. So you and I will be having a conversation. So come one, come all, and we look forward to a rousing conversation on the post-pandemic, anticipated post-pandemic reality. Good to see you all. Have a blessed evening.
In the hour of my